So now that you've kind of watched the introductory video on the 8 parts of speech, we're going to review a little bit more, and I'm going to give you some examples. And before we really start going over them, if you need to stop the video or go back and maybe write down some of the examples, please feel free to do so. I'm not going to really go too much in depth over some of these because we're going to go over them each really in depth throughout the 6 weeks and then use them throughout the year. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first one we're going to talk about is a noun, and we all know that it is a person, place, thing, or idea. And just to review that there are 5 different types of nouns: your common noun, your proper noun, your concrete, your abstract, and your collective nouns. And then our verbs are things that show action, so our action words, or that links a subject to another word. And we're going to talk about 3 today. So the first one we're going to talk about is the perfect verb. So a perfect verb is an action word that has already been completed. So when we say we ran yesterday, okay, well, ran is in the past, so this is something that we did. It's done. She finished her homework. This ed is a big signal that it was perfect. It's already been completed. Okay, now there's past perfect verbs, and that's when an action began in the past and is completed in the past. And your clue word for those is had. So we had played baseball last summer. Well, it's no longer this summer. We can infer that because we had played baseball last summer. And then again, here's that clue word, that had. The present perfect verb is an action that began in the past that can continue or is completed in the past. And your clue words are has or have. So I have played baseball before. This word have is going to be your present perfect verb. And then again, she has thrown fast pitch for the past 5 years. Here's your signal word is has. And we know that that is a completed action and that it started in the end and has also been completed, or could also be continuing. It's kind of unclear, and it can be both. The next one is progressive, and it is a verb that is ongoing, so an action that is ongoing. So the cake is baking slowly. This is your word, is baking, and we know that that is presently happening. Your past progressive verb is an action that's happening at a certain time in the past. And all these words in parentheses are going to be some of your signal words. So was and were. We were running when you called. So we were running and then you called, so we stopped. So we were running. Word is going to be your past progressive verb. Present is an action that's not completed at the time of stating it. Okay, so am, is, or are. So when you're stating it, when you're saying this sentence, it's still happening. The action is still happening. So the trees are waving back and forth. It's still happening while you're saying this exact sentence. They're waving back and forth. And here is your present progressive verb. Participles. Participles are verbs, but they can also be used as an adjective. And really, when we look at participles, we need to look at the dependent clauses. And we know that the dependent clause is the part of the sentence that cannot stand alone because it's dependent on something else. So if we look at this next sentence, rising out of the sea in front of us, the sun started to warm our faces. Well, if we break this down, the sun started to warm our faces. We know that that's a complete sentence. So that's going to be our independent clause. So our participle is not going to be in that clause. We need to come back over here and look at rising out of the sea in front of us. Now, we also know that we have to have a noun and a verb. So our noun right here is sea. Okay, and what is that? What is the sea doing? Well, it's rising. Okay, so it's describing what the sea is actually doing. And then our main verb is going to be the sun. Our main noun is going to be the sun. Our next sentence is a singing bird dangled from the tree. Well, right here we don't really have the dependent clause. So we don't have that comma there to kind of help us and to kind of see, well, is to the left of the comma a dependent or to the right of the comma, so on and so forth. So we really need to find out what the main verb is. So what the writer is really saying. So a singing bird dangled from the tree. Well, we know that singing is a verb because it's an action, and dangled is also an action. But what are we really placing emphasis on? The singing bird or the bird that's dangled from the tree? That's right, the bird that's dangled from the tree. So in this case, this word singing, while it looks like a verb, it is describing the bird. Okay, so this is going to be our participle. Now, we can also have dangling participles. And a dangling participle happens when you don't modify the correct noun. So if we look here, wishing I could sing, the high notes seem to taunt me. Well, our noun are the notes, but really we're not modifying the notes here. It's very unclear to the reader what we're actually modifying. So if we look at the second sentence, wishing I could sing, I feel the high notes seem to taunt me. Okay, well, we know right here, wishing I could sing, I feel, we know that the high notes are taunting her. And again, like I said, if you need to stop the video, please feel free and do so. And don't worry if you're still a little unclear about some of these verbs or some about the parts of speech, because we're going to go over them a little bit more in depth later on. Pronouns are used in place of a noun. And we know that there are four: the antecedent, the personal, the relative, and the interrogative. And really what we're going to go over here in the next few weeks is this relative pronoun, okay? The pronoun that connects that dependent and that independent clause. And then we have intensive and reflexive pronouns. And when we look at these intensive and these reflexive pronouns, these words here, himself, myself, we can see that these words are they're the same. And so you kind of want to ask yourself, well, so what's the big difference between them? And the difference between them is that these intensive pronouns, the sentence is still complete without those. Really, they just place this word emphasis on them. So the mayor himself attended the ceremony. If we took that out, the mayor attended the ceremony, it would still be the same sentence. Okay, we're really just placing that emphasis on the mayor. And then when we look at this reflexive pronoun, himself, John talks to himself when he is nervous. If we took that out, John talks to when he is nervous, well, that's not a complete sentence. So that reflexive pronoun must be in there. And then our adjectives. Our adjectives describe the noun or the pronoun. So we have demonstrative, adjectives, indefinite, comparative, and superlative. And then we also have those that don't follow any of these rules, and those are our irregular adjectives. And our demonstrative adjectives point out what the noun is. So this bird is huge. It's specific. The indefinite adjectives don't really tell us the amount of something or how much of something. So some birds fly north for the winter. Well, is it 10 birds or is it 1,000,000 birds? Is it a specific type of bird or is it all birds fly north for the winter? The comparative and superlative, the comparative compares only 2 different nouns. The superlative compares 3 or more nouns. So when we look at this example, Texas is the biggest state in the U.S. Well, we're comparing Texas and all the other states, and we know that there are 50 states in the U.S. So 50 is clearly more than 3. And then our comparative, Jacob is faster than Ian. This is only comparing Jacob and Ian. And if we go to our adverbs, we kind of have the same adverbs, except for this conjunctive, and we'll come back up to that in a minute. But when we look at the comparative and the superlative, again, it's just comparing 3 or more things and comparing 2 or more things. So she ran later than she usually does. So if she runs at 7, then maybe she ran at 9 this time, and it's comparing those 2 times. And the superlative, out of the entire team, Sierra practices more frequently. You're comparing how much Sierra practices to everybody on that team. And we know that teams are usually composed of 3 or more people. And if we go back up to this conjunctive adverb, these are adverbs that conjoin 2 different clauses. And if we see here, you must do your homework, otherwise you might get a bad grade. This word otherwise is that conjunctive adverb because it does connect these 2 phrases. And a good rule of thumb for the adverb is they tell us how, when, where, how often, or how much. So think about that. Make sure you write these down next to the word adverb because this can really help you a lot when we start to diagram sentences later. If we talk about prepositions, prepositions are words that show a different position or direction and how things are related. So this box example, think of any way you can be with a box. If you're in the box, if you're on the box, if you're beside the box. These are all these prepositions, so on, in, under. Another good example is to think of a squirrel. Well, what are all the different ways a squirrel can be around a tree? It can be beside the tree, above the tree, below the tree. All of those are prepositions. And then when we go further into prepositional phrases, these phrases will always start with the preposition and they will always end with the noun. So if we say the Lady Rebels were behind in the game, well, a squirrel can be in a tree, just like someone can be in the game. Okay, so that shows the position. And the noun that we're talking about here is the game. Okay, so in the game is your prepositional phrase. The Lady Rebels won at the last second. This is an example of how they're related. So at and then second is going to be your noun. So that's your prepositional phrase. Conjunctions connect words, phrases, and clauses together. And we're going to go into the conjunctions a little bit more later. We'll also give you a reference sheet to tell you what different conjunctions are coordinating, subordinating, and correlative. So we'll talk about those a little bit more in depth later. But basically, if we look at the coordinating thing, these 2 things that we're talking about, they have to be equal. So we're saying both polluted rivers and polluted streams can be cleaned up. So that word and is our coordinating conjunction. And correlative conjunctions are just used in pairs. We must reduce not only pollution, but also excess energy. This not only is going to be your paired correlative conjunction. And then subordinating conjunctions are things that are not equal. Okay, so remember, coordinating are equal, subordinating are not equal. So after we go to dinner, we are going to a movie. So that dinner takes precedence before the movie. And then lastly, we have interjections. And interjections are pretty fun. These expresses strong emotion. These are often punctuated with a comma or an exclamation point in a sentence. So if we look at these examples, we say, oh no, Hannah broke her arm. Well, this oh no is an interjection. That's your strong emotion here. And if we say, yikes, Hunter had to call 911. This yikes right here is going to be your interjection because that's an emotion. And we can see that in both of these examples, both of the punctuation are both exclamation points. So again, let's go ahead and go back up to the front page. If we, let's go ahead and black out this screen. If you need to go back and review some of these, please do so. And please make sure that you have taken some detailed notes because while I know this was just kind of a brief overview and we didn't go too in depth, we are going to be talking about each one of these parts of speech very in depth. And then in class, we're actually going to practice how we're going to find these parts of speech and really diagramming a sentence and seeing how all of these parts of speech, come together to create well-rounded sentences.